Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the RK Leadership Podcast, where we empower tomorrow's leaders through the sharing of experience, knowledge, and inspiring stories. I'm your host, Rob Cameronpour, and my very special guest today is Carmine Marcello. Carmine is a seasoned executive with distinguished career spanning nearly 4 decades in the utility industry. As a former CEO of Hydro One, he demonstrated transformative leadership by steering the company through critical periods of growth and change, leaving it with a robust financial position to capitalize on its IPO. He's the current chair of Gatescale Energy Development and an executive director at Hetherington Kearney Group. Welcome to the show, Carm.
Good to be here, Rob.
Awesome.
It's great seeing you after all these years.
Yes, absolutely. So are you ready to get started?
Ready when you are.
Awesome. So, Carm, why don't you walk us through your journey at a high level and tell us how you got to where you are today?
Okay. Just one thing on the introduction, though.
Sure.
And we can test it later.
Okay.
You said stirring Hydro One instead of steering Hydro One. And I'm just wondering, is it a Freudian slip? And, you can tell me why you think maybe I stirred the pot as opposed to steered the ship.
No, it was steering the ship.
Was I?
Yes.
Okay. I always thought I was stirring the pot.
That too, but, in this context, it was steering.
Okay. So my journey?
Yes.
Where do I start? Kindergarten?
Wherever you want.
I'm going to say a couple of friends of ours that I met during my MBA came up with this term called SOPI, son of poor immigrants. Mm. And it sort of stuck with us. And I think the thing that's interesting is there were daughters as well. It was a group of us in our MBA. And we all were first generation Canadians. None of us actually grew up thinking we were in any way, shape, or form poor. It didn't feel like that's what we are. Like, plenty to eat, clothes, everything was good.
That's right.
And you sort of reflect on where we are today to that time period, and you sort of scratch your head a bit and you go, yeah, maybe we were poor. We just didn't know it. So again, just an interesting tidbit. And it'll probably come up later in the dialogue, but a lot of first generation immigrant, got to go to school. And I think there's something lost in that. There's the got to go to school. There's the, find the right thing for you, because school might not be it. Learning a trade, doing something creative. But, we were instilled with got to go to school.
That's right.
So you go to school and, you're in high school working literally in the summer, 60 hours at a grocery store. And during school in high school, probably close to 30 hours a week.
Wow.
And you're sitting there and high school's easy. I don't know. If you got math and science and you happen to be able to write a decent essay, high school is not going to be your problem. So you don't even focus on it. You care less.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden it's grade 11, grade 12. What am I going to do? Right? You go to guidance and, you don't have a network of advisors or mentors.
Yes.
Like we do today. And you don't have access to them. So you go to guidance, and they do, back in the day, these bubble punch cards where you fill out and they come back and, oh, you're going to be good at this or you're going to be good at that. And it's all BS. Yes. And you're too young. You don't know what you're going to be good at. So, you're on this trajectory that you don't even know you're on.
That's right.
And, okay, I'm good at math and science. That's easy. Okay, you should apply to engineering. Well, why didn't I apply to business? Why didn't I apply to history? Why didn't I apply to the arts? Because I was good at math and science. Okay, what school are you going to apply to? All of them. Well, what do you mean all of them? Well, what's the best one? And someone will tell you what the best, okay, I'm applying to that one. Well, what program? Well, the hardest one. What's the hardest one? Engineering science. So you apply to that. And all of a sudden, you're not the smartest guy anymore. And you're not even close to the smartest guy. And you don't even make it into Eng Sci. And you're into electrical engineering. What do I know about electrical engineering? Nothing. Mm-hmm. But you're in first year, you do all right. And you've gone from being a smart guy to literally a dummy overnight. And that's a great feeling looking back, to be humbled.
That's right.
Right? But you're not on a trajectory of your own making. You're just going through the motions, what's expected of you maybe. And then you start in your second year having choices where you really have to think, well, you know what? I really do like power systems. Mm-hmm. So you start to lean towards some of the power system stuff. You look at some of the electives you have. Well, you know what? You don't start picking for marks. You start picking for what starts to speak to you. And before you know it, it's time to get a job. Oh, where are you going to work? I don't know. Who's going to take me? Who's going to have me? I mean, I graduated in 87. It was pretty tough times looking for work.
Yep.
I got a job offer at a place called Spruce Falls Pulp and Paper, Kapuskasing.
Oh,
okay. So your buddies are telling you, Kapuskasing. You couldn't even pronounce it. Like they were pronouncing it Kapiskasing, and we're all joking around. I show up for an interview middle of January wearing my dad's fine Italian coat, because this is an interview, and loafers. And I get off a plane in Kapuskasing. And if you've been there, it was a portable, the terminal.
Yep.
And you're looking around and snow is waist deep. And I'm wearing loafers. And in comes this big pickup truck. And the guy comes out with a parka and he just shakes his head. He's looking at me. And in his head, he never said it. It was like, oh, Jesus Christ. HR just sent us another guy from Toronto. No clue. Drives me around the town, looks at everything. My first comment, that's pretty cool. All your trucks at the paper mill are electric.
Mm.
I mean, this is 1987.
Wow.
All your cars are electric. And I know about electric cars. I know about regenerative braking, stuff you've studied in school. And you're saying, wow, they've actually got it. And the guy looks at me and again, shakes his head. What is this idiot? That's not electric cars, man. Those are block heaters. What's a block heater? You plug it in to keep the oil in the oil pan loose and, pretty smart. I mean, I just showcased my idiocy and I got the job.
Nice.
And then I realized I'm not a fit for this place. I'm not a fit for this weather. And I rejected the job. I ended up landing at Ontario Hydro after quite a few iterations. I think a lot of your listeners will probably be pleased to know that I didn't make the first cut. I got interviewed. Gentleman by the name of Dr. Paraba Kundar. Anybody who studied electrical engineering will recognize his name on a couple of textbooks. Smart guy, and he was a hydro, I think, manager of one of the technical departments. And was about to go in the interview when one of my colleagues came out. And I said, Paul, how'd it go? Oh, it was awful. What do you mean it was awful? He asked me a bunch of questions, and then he pointed to the wall, and he pointed to an electrical outlet. He goes, do you know what that is? He goes, like, I was so destroyed. I couldn't answer all of the technical questions that he got frustrated, and he pointed to an electrical outlet. And he goes, do you know what that is? Like, that's how brutal the interview was. I went in, I blacked out. I don't remember a single thing. I just remember letters of rejection. No, not going to get it. And so I'm going into graduation, no job. And one of the professors says, oh, Hydro's looking to hire. And I went to my professor. I go, I interviewed. I didn't make the cut. Oh, this one is a little bit less of a technical area. You might like it. So I put my name in the ring. I'm down. I have the interview, pretty standard, did fairly well. They asked me to write a paper, and I was good in English. Wasn't my forte, but I can write. And wrote an essay. And on the way out, the guy says to me, he goes, I got one last question for you. He goes, you used to work at Sunkiss Fruit Market. I go, yeah. And you said you worked there a lot. I go, yeah. He goes, I used to shop there. I remember you. I go, oh, really? Yeah. How much did you work there? And I said, all through high school. I told him 60 hours a week during the summer, close to 30 hours during high school. Do you work there during university? I go, yeah. In the summer a lot, but during school, it was just the weekends. He goes, you went to engineering and you did that? I go, yeah. He goes, okay, you'll be hearing from you. And I heard years later, we're having a beer at some company event. And I asked him, why'd I get the job? I was rejected the first time. Yeah, you worked hard. That was it. It was your work ethic. You had the marks. You can write a paper as good as anybody. You worked hard. And that was my start at Hydro. And to me, that's the most interesting part of my story, I think. Most people are like, oh, how did you become CEO or what did you do? And, I'm sure we'll get to those questions.
That's right.
But I don't think I would have ever gotten that first chance. And this was a day when, again, 87, it doesn't seem that long ago, but everybody asked me, who'd you know that got you the job? And I said, I didn't. I applied. How'd you get in? I go, I didn't make the first cut, but I got in the second time. And even the second time, they didn't put me in the graduate training program. I didn't make the cut. There were so many smarter, better. I was just sloughed off into a corner doing some technical stuff. And I was ecstatic. Don't get me wrong. I was ecstatic, but wouldn't have even gotten a chance. So the rest of it is like easy. But that was my story. That's my start.
Relatively easy, relatively to,
Well, I mean, easy relative to what? And, I'm looking at your sign here, Rob's leadership. And we're talking about leadership at some point.
That's right.
And you reached out to me and I was an impactful leader from your perspective. I'm just a guy who did my job presumably well. And when people are analyzing it, looking back, saying, oh, you got some leadership skills. And I think I said this to you. I don't see myself as a leadership practitioner or the understanding of the theory or all the rest. I can tell you stories and you can tell me, yeah, that's what leadership means to you. But I'm looking at it and my real question is, why does everybody care about leadership? Okay, I did a good job. I did well. My career did all right by your standards.
Yep.
Maybe by my standards, I became a CEO doesn't really mean the same thing it would mean to someone else.
That's very true, Carm. And there's different ways to look at that. So you said the hardest part was to get in. But we also know that in a large organization like a Hydro One, it's also very difficult to climb that ladder. So just as hard as it was to get in, I'm pretty sure you had to put in the effort to climb up as well, right?
I think my point is I didn't care to climb up.
It just happened.
Part of it did, and I'm not going to pretend at some point your ego doesn't kick in.
Yeah.
For that last bit. But my journey was I had achieved success just landing there. I'm going to be doing something from a technical perspective that I grew to like. I grew to love.
Yep.
Right? It wasn't my journey, I'm going to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or whatever. I stumbled into it and then I found the beauty in it. And at some point over time, I developed a brand. I didn't set out and say, what's my brand? Here's my brand statement. Here's my brand. I developed a persona.
Absolutely.
My character spoke for itself and became sought out in certain challenges. And I would say the only time when drive, ego, ambition really kicked in, I was probably director VP. And at that point, you're sort of looking at this thing called the brass ring that everybody strives for. And it was like, oh, okay, you know what? I got a shot. Why not? But that wasn't the driving force or the motivating factor. My son pointed out early in his career, he was in engineering and deathly afraid of public speaking. And I remember sharing my story, public speaking. I said, I never spoke in any meeting at Hydro. The first actual speech I gave, I was in my 30s, like early 30s. And I paid out of my own pocket to join a course, and it was recommended to me by someone, a Dale Carnegie course. It was like thousands of dollars. Again, we're going back 30, 40 years here.
That's right.
Out of my own pocket. It wasn't, hey, boss, send me to this public speaking course. It came out of my own pocket. And I learned to become a public speaker, right? My son took that piece of advice and did Toastmasters and, broke out and started doing these things. But it wasn't as much as, oh, I need to be a public speaker because I want to be a leader or I'm going to be a great orator. Or it was like, in my job, the next step, this is a skill I don't have.
That's right.
I need to pick it up. And I think I was naive enough not to understand that, hey, Hydro could have paid for this back in the day. Mind you, they did pay part of my MBA, not all of it, but I did that on my own part-time as well. And I would say just out of pure pleasure and interest, because there's nothing riding on your MBA. I have my job. I've achieved my success.
That's right.
In my head. I started taking courses that I just enjoyed taking. And I didn't care about the marks. And, it got to a point where people would joke, pay your fee, get your B, right? You weren't killing yourself for an A, and you weren't taking courses just to take them. You were taking them because they meant something to you and you can grow. Anyway, I've done what I've always done, Rob. I ramble. So you're going to have to cut me off.
That's okay.
Or change the subject or pivot, because I start on a story and I lose my way, and
no problem.
Sometimes I find my way back.
No problem. So I have a few follow-up things before we get into the deep leadership aspect. So you talked about, going to university, and, for some people, they don't know what to get into. For some people, I don't know if you fall into this category. It's the parents pushing you to become an engineer, a doctor, or whatever it may be. But actually being in university, Carm, and let's say studying engineering, where I think we both studied electrical engineering, what should people focus on? Like, what should the students focus on? Because you're learning so much theoretical stuff. And coming out of school, a lot of that stuff doesn't apply in the real world because you're learning all these new things. So how important is like a 4.0 GPA, when you come into the real world, and what should they really focus on when they're in school?
Great question. Everybody's different. So why are you going to school in the first place? Make your parents happy? Finding a job? Want to be a finance bro and get rich? Love tinkering with the technology? Like, all those things are different.
Yeah.
And so I think the answer is know yourself, first off.
That's right.
The problem is 18, 19, 20, 25, no one knows themselves. I mean, it's a very rare person who knows themselves. I know a couple, right?
Yeah.
But it's a very rare person who knows themselves. So why are you going to school? You're learning to learn if you're in university, or you're learning a trade because it speaks to you. Or, I have 3 kids. 2 of them went into the arts. One is very artistic. One went into a more practical program associated with the arts. And the third is a chemical engineer. My advice to them was go after something you like, sure. When they're watching this, they're going to laugh. That's not true. You made me cry during grade 10 math. You made me take math. I shouldn't. Not true. They are all allowed to drop math after grade 11. They had to take grade 10. Yes, I made you cry because I, was frustrated and I don't get why you don't think like me, right? So I've grown as well as a person. But the fact is, there are many career choices out there that you don't need to be miserable. So find the ones that speak to who you are. But that said, why are you in engineering? And I don't know if your audience is engineering or technical related. You're learning to learn.
Yeah.
If you don't like learning, like if you genuinely don't like your learning, there's some programs you just shouldn't touch. Because I don't think of the 4 years of technical learning, there's probably 10% that was ever used within the scope of my technical job. I learned everything on the job that I needed to learn. From an MBA, I remember people asking me, "Oh, you got your MBA? How did it help you in your career?" And I remember saying, "It didn't." And I refined that answer now. For the first 10 years, it didn't. But then as you look on it and you reflect, yeah, it did help. And the biggest thing I learned from my MBA is it's not engineering. Engineering, does the bridge stay up or does the bridge fall down? Do the lights stay on or do the lights go off? In an MBA, it's much more nuanced. There's marketing, there's behavioral, organizational behaviors, there's leadership, there's entrepreneurship. There's so many other things in there. And, I think I was wired as a black and white, right and wrong, 1 and 0, technical. Right. And then you go into an MBA and write a paper on, this is before the economic union in Europe, but write a paper on a common currency. Okay, there's some technical economic theory going in there, but your tabletop is much broader than you're used to. So it taught you how to learn a different way.
Yes.
And I think those are the things you want to get out of your education. Can I learn? Can I have fun while I'm learning is even better. I'm not going to pretend I had that advice, right? I didn't. But as I reflect, I think that is the most important point of any education. And again, I don't care what the subject is. One of my experiences most recently, we're working on some renewable energy development. I'm brought in as an advisor. I'm an investor as well. I'm brought in as an advisor. I'm on the board. I'm at the time, probably the only engineer in the group of very smart people. And there's one young guy there, political science background, history background, and great learner, great researcher. And every time we have a meeting with a broader investor group and we do go around the table, he introduces himself and the role he has within this project. And I always, at the end, interrupt and I say, "Oh, he doesn't do himself justice. Of everybody I know, he is the best engineer I've ever met who doesn't have an engineering degree."
Wow.
And I mean it. Like, this guy has worked and researched and solved technical issues because we're a small, tight team, and it fell to him to do with guidance from some folks who do have some technical background. But it was him. He did it. And he's not an engineer. Yet, when I look at him, I'm sitting there going, this guy knows how to learn.
That's right. I think that's the most important part, right?
I think
Knowing
so.
how to learn.
Yeah. Or having the drive to learn.
Yes, exactly. So, Carm, I want to get into the leadership aspect.
Sure.
And I want to break down the leadership category into, the 3 different tiers or levels, whatever you want to call it. So starting with the entry level leadership. So looking back at the start of your career, what key qualities or skills did you develop early on that proved invaluable as you progressed?
The biggest leadership challenge I had, and this is my first leadership role, so it's probably, trying to think, 10 years into my career, and I'm a manager of a department of about 30 people.
Mm-hmm.
And again, going back, this is one of the departments to which I was not qualified to even get a job working for. Okay?
Interesting.
And not that anybody would know that or remember that, but it's just a fact. So I'm leading 30 highly skilled engineers, master's degrees, PhDs, and I'm the most junior of the lot and severely underpaid relative to the history of the company and how things progressed. And I beat out a couple of my subordinates, now subordinates, for the role, who are clearly technically much better than I am. No doubt. And it's one of those, what did I get myself into here? And I sat down with a couple of the folks individually, had discussions. And at the end of the day, I basically said, I will never be technically as competent as you or anybody in this department. I have a good understanding. I have a layman's understanding. I said, but one thing I am very good at is managing all of the noise outside, getting us the budgets we need to do the work that's important, prioritizing that work, and making sure that our customers outside of Hydro are being satisfied. So let's come to an arrangement and agreement right up front that I don't tell you how to do your technical job, and my job is to empower you to do that job that you've got for yourself. And at the same time, if you feel you can do the job better than me, a year from now, I'll leave. You can have it. Subject to what your boss says, my boss says,
That's right.
One level removed. And the beauty of that was probably the start of me becoming a very technically competent engineer, because I wasn't a threat to anybody. I didn't know what I didn't know. I knew how to ask all the right questions from a customer perspective, from a business case perspective, from a corporate perspective. And in those discussions, I had a desire to learn the technical stuff. And some of my best teachers were associate professors at different schools in engineering. Some of them were master's degrees. And I joke, I don't have a master's degree in a technical field. I don't have a PhD, but I spent the better part of, 5-6 years every day, 8 hours a day with some of the best technical minds in the company.
That's right.
And I learned from them. And that actually served me quite well in my career from a technical perspective. And I went from, in my own growth, I find, from being novice to expert on a technical field over the course of a few years. And clearly, I think at that point, I must have shown some sort of ability to navigate the corporate structure, because I did get that role relatively early on, 10 years back in the day, to supervise 30 people in the field. I don't know. Seemed like a pretty rapid career move. Maybe it's not anymore.
Today.
Not today, but back then it was like, you got to put in your time and all the rest. Now you got to remember, all those people retired really quickly, and those who came after all got promoted a lot faster and brought new, fresh ideas, and refreshed the organization, I think. But from the perspective of being the employee, as opposed to someone moving up, you're sort of sitting there struggling with this concept of what is experience actually worth.
That's right. Yep.
So there's a difference between time and experience and knowledge and all the rest. So all those things need to be factored in as you think about the career journey.
That's right. So I got 2 follow-up questions for you with respect to that, what you said. So one is, again, with my experience in a technical organization, do you believe that you've got to be the subject matter expert to be picked to lead a team who are in that realm per se? Because again, for me, it's if you're in a leadership role, the first thing you got to learn to do is lead people.
I think,
Right.
And again, this is, as I reflect, I didn't have the scope or the experience at the time to appreciate this. But the traditional journey was start at a technical role, move up the technical role, be the subject matter expert, lead the
Yes.
team, and you've hit your level of incompetence. So you stay there and make everybody's life miserable and people leave. But the department still functions well because you're technically ticking all the boxes.
That's right.
And over time, one of the things I tried to implement at Hydro while I was there was sort of the dual career path, right? So the problem was the only way to move up was to become a manager as opposed to a technical, an SME, a subject matter expert.
That's right.
So the ability to have the dual path, I think, is organizationally something that needs to take place. Because what you don't want is a technically competent person in a managerial role that they're not suited for, they're not happy with, and poisoning their work environment.
Yes.
And on the flip side, someone who is not technically necessarily the best, but has some leadership skills, being stifled, never getting that chance. And to me, at the time, trying to make those changes within Hydro, I thought that was kind of novel and forward thinking, something I never encountered in my MBA, which was stale and out of date. But then I was pleased to see in some of my travels since with Hetherington Kearney, I've done some audits on some other utilities. I've had the opportunity to travel to the Middle East and the Caribbean and the US. And
Nice.
you start to see that there are many organizations who actually recognize the dual career path. And it's to their overall benefit.
Absolutely.
There are people who are just, you need to reward them for their skill and their technical competence. And there are people who are clearly leaders, and there's some people who are both and some people who are neither. But to try to force fit is just a recipe for disaster.
I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely.
So one of the things I didn't touch on, and again, it just clicked and came back to me. Part of my journey, I was the unit director in the society. And for those of you who don't know, that's basically a trade union within Hydro One that represents engineers.
That's right.
And I had about 200 engineers who I represented. And the number one complaint they had was, there is no career progression for me.
Yes.
And the answer generally was, sure there is. You can be an MP6 or a Band 7 or whatever it is and become a management. No, I don't want to be a manager. I want to progress my career technically.
Yes.
And you sort of stalled out at a certain level. And there's some people who were fine with that, but there was obviously a lot of people who were frustrated. And again, you end up losing great people.
So, Carm, my follow-up question, and this is for all of you guys that asked me this question online. How does a young leader, getting into that leadership role, leading 30 people at that age, how do you lead senior people, like, senior above you with more experience, and how do you get them to follow you? A lot of young leaders struggle with that.
Again, the example I gave a moment ago was probably the best I can think of, which was I recognized what they're good at and what I'm good at, and had just a frank, open discussion. I didn't pretend that I didn't beat you out for the job, so I'm not going to deal with that and
That's right.
hurt feelings. I went back and I said, I beat you out for the job. I didn't beat you out because I'm technically better, because I'm not. I need you to be the technical lead. Now, I didn't have the ability to reward someone with a 2-career path that said, at the time I didn't have, you're going to be the technical go-to guy,
yeah,
or technical go-to girl. No, but over time, I clearly demonstrated that that's what I envisioned your role to evolve into. And I was going to play in this domain. And it was funny because some people wanted to hold a grudge, and they would continue to.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of folks, and I think there were 3 people specifically, and 2 of them basically said, you know what? This is going to work just fine if you keep that BS off my plate. And I just made a point of keeping the BS off their plate.
Yes.
And there were times where, do you want to go and present?
Mm-hmm.
No, you handle it. Yeah, I would like to present. Okay, come up with me. You're presenting.
Nice.
And afterwards, I could have interrupted you and I could have said this, and this. Next time, would you like me to do that or not? No, I got it covered, but thanks for letting me know. I'll make sure I cover it. You know what? Yeah, you know what? I felt I was a little underwater. It would have been good if you helped me out in that scenario. Okay, you know what? Give me the nod, give me the signal, throw me a verbal cue, and we'll riff off of that. And that just became sort of finding that rhythm.
That's right.
But again, you can't do that if you're not willing to address the underlying emotions. People are emotional beings.
Yeah.
If you don't deal with the emotional issue, then it's just going to fester or repeat itself. And I'm not going to pretend I had great success and I never had a grievance against me or anything. No, but I tried. I tried to get to those issues. And again, I never viewed it as leadership. And I think this is one of the conversations we had sort of offline.
That's right. Yes.
A lot of the things I learned and I experienced were things I didn't like.
Yes.
Myself. I didn't like, and this is an example when I became more senior. I didn't like the fact that we were in a team. We were in silos.
Mm.
I didn't like that the information only flowed one way, top down, but never flowed laterally or bottom up or kitty corner from a different angle. And when I had the ability to change the way the leadership team functioned and how I shared information, I created those either organizational mechanisms or meetings, and I modeled the behavior that I valued myself. And I'm not pretending other people are going to value it the way I did, but I just knew that these were things that I didn't like and demotivated me, and I didn't want to repeat those things.
That's right. And I think that's one of the key things, Carm, is we see, as you're going through the ranks, you're going through various jobs, you see how you're being treated by your manager. Don't do what they're doing to you that you don't like. So when you get an opportunity to get into that role, don't do what they did to you that you didn't like.
Yeah. And the other side, the positive side of that is there's a lot of things that make you feel good.
Yes.
What are those things?
That's right.
And then the third one is there are things that maybe don't impact you personally, but still have value or detriment to the people around you. So the easy first step is, how did I feel?
Yes.
I felt good. I felt bad. Therefore, I will repeat the good and I will eliminate the bad. Okay, that's great. That's half the battle.
Yeah.
Then remember that the person you're talking about isn't you. They don't value everything that you value the same way.
That's right.
So what is it that they value? What makes them feel good? What makes them feel bad?
Mm-hmm.
And can you internalize that and bring that to the table? And again, I'm not pretending to say my job is to make your life great and make you happy, but I want you engaged. I want you motivated. And if I'm giving you meaningful work and you're coming to it with a pure heart, which I got to believe everybody who comes out of school has a pure heart. We just blacken it along the way.
Yes.
You know what? Then you're fostering that spirit. And to the extent that you can foster that, it just pays off on its own in positive ways. And again, not everything is always rosy. When things aren't, that's probably the time where your character, your behaviors that you've modeled become the most important.
That's right.
So pulling into your shell and cocooning and putting your head down and not addressing the problem, creating a vacuum is a bigger problem in itself. Your job is to make sure your people feel secure in what they're doing. And sometimes the world is not secure.
No.
And you need to recognize that.
Exactly. So, Carm, now moving up to the mid-level management. So let's talk about like director level, senior manager level. Now you've learned some stuff as your entry level management. Now you're in that mid-level. What do you think the biggest challenges are in somewhere like a utility environment, and how do you navigate those challenges?
I think mid-level is less about leading your own team and more about influencing all those around you. Other teams that may be in different organizations, companion teams, different relationships, broader relationships. So it's more about everything around you. And again, different skill, different stress. It's just a very different environment. And looking to create, and again, this is where you start getting discussions around culture.
Yes.
You're not at a level where you can create or define the culture of the organization. You have to play within it. And you need to influence it and try to change it. But that's like pushing rope.
Yeah.
You don't have those levers available at your disposal. So you're playing within the sandbox that's been handed to you. And what you don't want to do, and again, I'm focusing on a negative here, there are parts of the culture that are just not good. You don't want to focus on those. You want to focus on the good things. You want to put the company first, the unit first, the customer first, the stewardship of the asset first. What is it we're doing here? It's not, I'm trying to create an empire. I'm trying to build an empire. I'm playing the political game, because those will be there.
Yeah.
And that's the part I'm saying you don't want to be involved in. You have to be aware of it. You have to be able to navigate it. You need to be able to protect your people within that context. But really what you want to be doing is, in any discussion, argument, be on the side of angels. So what is your business here to do? Right? It's easy. For us, it was keep the lights on.
Yep.
Keep the bill reasonable. Okay. Everything gets boiled down to that. So if you're in the business of creating a product for a consumer, what's your business? Providing value to that customer.
That's right.
Right? It's not selling more stuff. It's providing the value so that they want to buy more stuff and all the benefits that come. And then you start looking at the world through that lens. What is the organizational friction between my department and your department that's causing us not to get there? What are the political games that are being played around us that stand in the way of achieving the broader goal? Let's address those things and get them off the table. And when you think about transformational change,
yes,
and you've used that. To me, it's really three things: people, process, technology. Okay, so what is it I'm trying to change and why? Okay, you got to understand that. But then what am I going to focus on? It's easy to say, oh, we're going to be better. We're going to be customers focused. How? People, process, technology. If the process is broken, you got to fix it. If your technology is lagging, you need to update it. If your people don't have the right attitude, is that really the problem? Or you didn't train them. You didn't give them the tools.
Yep.
You didn't motivate them. You didn't give them a scorecard so that they know what it is they're supposed to do. You haven't engaged them. You haven't given them the tools they need.
Got to look internally.
And you got to look at all those dimensions. So now your job is not that simple or let me motivate my team. Now your job is broader, right? Are the processes running? Can they be improved? Are the technologies there to support? Do I have the tools I need? Are my people being developed and used to their fullest potential? What's standing in the way of that? And those challenges become a lot broader. And again, you're a technical person, you grew up in the organization, you found yourself in this role. All of a sudden, you got to sit there and go, who are the people that are most important to me making these changes? Well, process. Okay, so I didn't come up from business process.
Yeah.
But now I better understand it. Technology. I'm not an IT guy, but I know I can do a better job if I had better tools. And the people, organizational development, the way the jobs are designed, all those HR functions it's not my job, that's HR. No, how do I engage them? How do I develop a training program that means something to them? Right? The supervisors don't have supervisory skills because they were promoted because they were a great technical person.
Yes.
And now I'm sitting there going, well, whose fault is that? Why haven't we trained our supervisors to be better people managers?
Yep. But again, Carmen, you're at that mid-level management and you want to do something positive. You want to drive these changes because you do see the issues. How do you get that support and buy-in from people above you?
That's your job. And that's your death, the death of you.
Yes.
Right? You hear, he cares too much. You got to pick one thing. What's strategy? Like I spend a lot of time, like when I sit back and the things I love, strategy. One of the things I love. And everybody's strategy is, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. No, strategy is, these are all the things I'm not doing because I'm focusing on this one thing or two things, right? You hear boiling the ocean.
Yes.
You can't do it. You're just going to expend all your energy and you'll have accomplished nothing. So you need to sit back and you need to say, okay, what's my biggest problem and challenge? And if my biggest problem and challenge is, and I'm going to give you an example that's sort of rooted in some experience and reality. My biggest problem and challenge is my technology sucks and I need to update it. So I keep bouncing my head off the wall every year, trying to get it onto the CIO's list of projects to do, but I never can make it because it's either too much money or the business case is not well defined. Okay, you know what? Stop beating your head against the wall. You're not going to get the technology fix. Is there a business process I can implement that's within my control, that's easier, that gets me halfway there? You know what? Can I train my people to do something a little bit better until I get the technology fix? No, I can't. Can I reorganize? You know what? What I'm going to do is I'm going to split the division in half. This half is operational. This half is firefighting mode. This half is planning. Right? And that will take and create some time. And boy, wouldn't it have been better if I just had an AI envisioned chatbot able to solve this and take 90% of my problems away? Yeah, it would be. You know what? I don't have that business case yet. But now the next year, maybe I do. Or maybe I'm sitting out there waiting for that group over there who developed a business case for some AI automation. And I call them up and say, hey, can we piggyback just one little pilot, this little thin little wedge, just in a skunk's work off to the side to see if we can pull something off and build a business case? And build your alliances. But I think the problem is your audience isn't going to understand the reference. And I apologize. Okay, some of us are older than. There was a TV show back in the day called The Flintstones.
Oh, yes.
And I think everybody knows it, but no one knows it. And Fred Flintstone gets promoted to be Mr. Slate's successor, the CEO of Slate, I don't know, Enterprises, whatever. It's a quarry. And he comes home from work not realizing, after having spent a whole day being the boss, that he's not the boss. He's got shareholders. So I guess my point here is you're the boss, but you're not.
Yep.
Your world just got more complicated, and you need to be able to adapt to that level of complexity. And part of the thing you need to be able to do is compartmentalize your brain and say, I now own all of this, but that only means I can only do 2 or 3 things well. And picking the right ones are going to be the key to your success.
Yeah.
And trying to do too much, you're going to burn yourself out and you're going to be miserable as hell and you're going to achieve nothing.
Well, that's great advice, Carm. And, you know, I went through that and I learned it the hard way as well. So that's, I think, a very good advice to the young folks out there who are trying to do that.
I'll try to find a reference for the Flintstones getting the top job, but I'm sure you can. I'm sure if you find it, we can put in a YouTube clip. Don't forget to give Hanna-Barbera the credit and
for sure.
Send them royalties.
All right. So now moving up to the executive leadership, Carm, as a former CEO, what shift in mindset was most crucial when you were transferring to an executive leadership in a large utility company?
So this one is a very tough question for me because
that's why
I never thought I'd be a CEO. I never planned to be a CEO. But once you hit VP and you're looking at what it is, your ego kicks in. Sorry, my ego kicks in. I'm not saying your ego. Your ego could kick in, you know, the day you started the company saying, I'm going to be the CEO one day. Good, do it. But for me, it wasn't until it was like within grasp. And I remember having the conversation where there were 3 of us internally vying for the job plus externals. 3 of us groomed. And I remember when it was interview time, I had spoken with my wife about this and I said, I'm not applying. I'm pulling my hat out of the ring. And she goes, why? And I gave her a whole bunch of reasons. And she goes, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. She goes, but who says you have to do the job the way the previous CEOs did the job? And I paused and I thought, you know, good advice. What is it I want to do? So I laid out 3 things I wanted to do and went into my interview. And the interviews were a little easier because you've been groomed for 3 or 4 years. They know you.
Yep.
And I remember I was asked the question, why do you want the job? And I said, that's the wrong question. And the interviewer, and this was, you know, our board of directors, he looked at me, he goes, what do you mean? The question isn't why I want the job. The question is, who do you want to lead this company? And I said, if you want someone who has this set of desires and characteristics, it shouldn't be me. And if you want someone who's going to focus on this, and I'm not getting into specifics, then it should be that guy over there. We all knew who our competition was. And I go, but if you want someone who's going to do A, B, and C, then you should pick me. And A was, we need to change the culture of the organization to become commercially focused on our customers. And that in and of itself talks to a whole host of transformations that need to take place. And we need to be value-based. And that was the first thing. And I rolled out what was something that took about 2 years to put together. It was very basic, 5 key values that we're going to focus on. And every conversation was going to rest on those values about employee empowerment, safety, customer service, excellence, those sorts of things. But it wasn't just words.
Mm-hmm.
Each one had initiatives, planning, a thought process. And lo and behold, you get the job. And now your complexity just expanded beyond all reason. And you got to remember again, at the time, minority government. We were owned by the Crown. It wasn't IPO'd yet.
That's right.
And all those things you wanted to do now fall to the back burner because there's the things you have to do.
Yep.
Because you have Mr. Slate's job. You're not Fred Flintstone anymore. And you struggle to keep those things you laid out in that interview alive. And we did roll out the values because you put on specific resources to ensure that those things happen. And then you started to implement and model the behavior you wanted to see in the organization so you can start driving the culture.
That's right.
And the tough part, the really tough part, was not being overtaken by all the challenges of the day because they're very real. And remember, the reason you actually applied for the job and took the job was this specific change I wanted to make and to make sure that that happened. So again, why are you attaining that level? Is it about the money? Then focus on the money.
Yeah.
Is it about the power and the prestige? Then focus on the trappings of the office, right? Be true to yourself. Like, don't pretend. You don't need to tell everybody what it is, but you don't need to pretend either. And then the beauty of that journey was after I left Hydro, I had a job day one. And I was told by my wife, why are you going to work there? Like there's 100 measures of success that said that's where I should have gone. And what I did was I turned it down very quickly after I had accepted initially. And I started Hetherington Kearney. And I laid out a vision for that. And the vision for that is remarkably simple. There was a list of things that I was really, really good at that I never wanted to do ever again in my life. And I don't care how much you were going to pay me, I was going to reject. And I made that list. And then there was a list of things that I absolutely loved doing and enjoyed. And I'd be happy to continue to do it if someone were to pay me a fair value for what I was doing. And this was not about money. This was that the person I was dealing with valued my expertise and advice the way I valued giving it.
That's right.
And that was it. And it was that basic and simple. I got involved in Gateskill, in some renewable energy projects, small team, but it's, again, always core. The technical stuff is interesting to me. I love doing it. The people, these projects are much more about a formal way of mentoring. And I think if I sit back and I look at what I do, given the amount of time, and again, I go back to strategy. Strategy isn't everything. Strategy is something very small and tight. You know what? I can only handle 10 quality mentorships. Some of them are within a company called Gateskill, where the value I bring is received within the context of that organization doing its work.
Correct.
And you know what? Some days you sort of sit back and go, wow, we're going to create a lot of value there. And some days you sit back and going, I don't really care. I love working with my CEO and with my team. And I love, for me, to be able to have even an infinitesimal amount of success. I'd love to see success of the person I'm working with, but for me to have had even an infinitesimal contribution to that is really the success I'm looking for. Fulfillment, great word. So, when you look at that journey, what are the things you're most proud of sometimes? And being CEO, sure, that made the top 10, but barely. Creating the values was close to number one.
Mm-hmm.
And there is something on that list that was higher than becoming the CEO. And I recall I was on a due diligence team for an acquisition of a transmission utility in Argentina.
Mm-hmm.
And this was 1993. And I was supposed to be on the team that went Hydro One International to Argentina, do the evaluation. And I couldn't go because, not 93, 97. My daughter was just born. So what I said was, I'm going to be working from home for 5 weeks. You send me everything you need translated and worked on at night. I'll have you the answer the next morning, because I was doing the night shift at the time with the baby, and we have 3 kids, right? And I remember working in my basement on that due diligence, and all the documents were in Spanish, and I don't speak Spanish. I speak Italian and I understand math. And we were just going back and forth. And for some reason, it was the most fun. And, we never got a chance to bid. We never won. I never made it to Argentina. But there was something about that activity that just stayed with me for, here we are, more than 30 years later.
Nice.
That just stuck with you. And it's like, yeah, I was glad to be part of that team.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's a great story. So Carm, a few things. So one is, you talked about values.
Yeah.
Coming from a utility world, you've been there much longer than I have. One of the things I've seen, and again, tying leadership to it, I was never a big fan, and some people will argue with me, till the moon comes out. I disagreed with having safety as your first priority.
Yeah.
For me, it was always your people come first, because your people drive the safety. Everything resides from people. Safety by itself doesn't drive anything. It's a word, right?
Okay. Can I interrupt you?
Sure, go ahead.
So I don't have my value card in front of me. I don't care. I used to carry it everywhere. There were 5 values.
Correct.
People was one of them. Safety was one of them. Customer was one of them. I don't think I called it people. Maybe it was employees, but I think we called it people.
People, yeah.
And nowhere did I pretend that there was a ranking.
You didn't, I know.
Okay.
But there's some people that always put that ranking.
Yeah, and I can tell you a story, and I'm not sure it's going to make the edit. We'll decide later. Do you remember my first safety video? No.
No.
So I got up and I spoke about a personal reason why safety was important. I'm not going to get into it. I don't want to get into it for a broader audience. Okay. I made it very personal to everybody. Safety is important. March 5th, I'm not in the job for 3 months yet.
Yeah.
We had a fatality. Okay. And I'm not bad, devastating. Okay. I'll agree with you that people and their behavior and tools and their systems and all those things are necessary for safety. I think safety is one of the top 5 values. I think the way at the time safety was rewarded and punished monetarily was crass. But that was a system we had, and that's the system that remained. And I think this is the one area where you have to recognize, you and I can debate all we want. And I'm not debating with you, actually, because I argued your point of view. You got to understand your span of control, your level of influence, and your ability to influence an outcome. So, Mr. Slate had a board of directors.
That's right.
The priority was set. you execute according to the priority.
Mm.
And honestly, I think we're arguing angels on the head of a pin, right? It's two different sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
So
I just wanted to get your perspective on it.
yeah,
Because for me, yeah, safety's always, but people first, right? I just want to get your thoughts.
I'm not going to say people first. I'm going to say safety is an outcome that's driven by people.
Exactly.
And I'll say that. The organization is going to say what's first. And there were times in our history where net income was first.
Yes.
Then safety.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't want to debate that.
Sure. So one of the stories I wanted to share with the audience was something that stuck with me over the years, and we've had a conversation because of it. And again, I wanted to share that with the audience. So I remember being in the second or third year at Hydro One, fairly, coming in young, started at the bottom again. And one of the things I wanted to do, and I did, was I sent an email to all the executives and all the top level management asking them for career advice. And to my surprising, you're the first one that responded back to my email, taking me on the offer of having a 10-minute coffee with me. To me, that stuck with me till today, because a lot of people didn't do that, Carm. To me, that's leadership. And my question to you is, with your hectic schedule, and we know what the CEO schedule looks like, why did you decide to do that?
You asked?
But I'm at the bottom level,
Listen, there's no such thing as bottom in hierarchy. Okay? You start back, you go back to the discussion, son of immigrant parents or son of poor immigrants or whatever. My mom worked for her family, and I'm sure there are people who would have looked at her job and looked down on her.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a dignity and a class about her that would never allow that. Level doesn't matter. It really doesn't. You asked, there it was. Me personally, for me, my DNA, I wouldn't have even had the courage to ask. But you asked, so sure. And I don't answer everybody because sometimes you can't.
That's right.
Right? But I tried. Everybody. There were some things that just mean something to you and some things that people won't recognize. Those certificates you get, how many years you work at Hydro?
Yes. Yeah.
Right? They're printed with the CEO's signature there, and they get stuffed in an envelope and off they go. If you did that, licked your finger and wiped my signature, it would come off because I signed every one of them myself.
Wow. Why?
Because I remember getting them, and I remember licking my finger and wiping my finger across the signature. And it was always blue ink that was pressed onto something. And you know what I did with those things? I threw them in the garbage. Right? Why? Because what do I mean to you? This is, in my mind, this is an empty gesture. There are family members I have, my father-in-law, every certificate for 35 years he got from the TTC is on his wall. He was proud.
Nice.
Right? Great for him. I looked at those and I'm saying they were just forms that were sent out, but he valued it.
Yeah.
For me, I would sign each one, and I was told, you don't need to do that. No, this means something to me to do that. Now, no one knows that. I doubt anybody ever ran their finger to see if the ink smudged, to see if it was real or not. But it meant something to me to do it. And, sometimes you talk about those small gestures that mean something.
Yes.
I wish as a leader, I can find the gesture that meant something to each individual person and to customize that gesture 5,000 times, 5,000 customizations. But I can't. So I did the gesture from me that you might not even know about, but meant something for me to do.
That's right.
You made a call about, let's have a coffee. I don't remember that. And I told you that, I don't remember. But I do know that if someone said, hey, Carm, I'd like to talk to you about something. I'm new to the company. That meant something. It meant something to me when I became CEO, that every onboarding session we had with new employees, I was there. Something big had to happen for me not to be there.
Mm.
And even when something big happened, it was rearrange it, I'll come later.
Nice.
Right? People would ask, and I would stay for a half hour and scheduled, and I would stay until there were no questions left, or you'd look at the clock and we were done. That meant something to me.
No, and that means a lot. And this is why the message was to all the people with the titles, that leadership aspect doesn't matter what titles you have, but the impact that you leave on the younger generation can mean a lot to them. And I did take your advice. I took that job in the field, and it was one of the best experiences. And what I learned the most, that made me a real leader, taking that job. So again, thank you for that. And from a consistency perspective, that was not the only time. I don't know if you remember the time where I sent you a letter about we want to, with the culture change.
Yeah.
You put your entire executive team in front of us. Like, who does that? Not a lot of people do that. So that to me is real values of a real leader.
I appreciate the feedback, and the one ask I have is this process here, you and I talking before this webinar, was nice because I did something and you told me what it meant to you. And I've come to appreciate that there's a lot of stories like that. So if anybody has a story that they want to share with me, I'd love to hear it. I really would. It goes back to the comment I made a few moments ago. How do you define success? Success is probably, able to contribute even a sliver of my story. I won't say experience or advice, but my story to someone and have a meaningful impact in their story.
That's right.
Right? It doesn't matter whether it was a career or it just the fact that that little bit mattered is enough.
That's right.
Yeah.
And even what you're doing right now is, I'm sure, going to inspire somebody out there to say, hey, I want to follow that path. I can do it too.
I guess my only advice is follow your own path. Don't follow mine, but find your own path. Be aware, be self-aware. There are a lot of things where you're doing the right thing from your heart, and you might not even appreciate that maybe that isn't the right thing.
That's right.
It's got to be received by someone else as well. There's the giving and then there's the receiving.
You got it.
So you've got to look at both sides of that equation.
Exactly. So we've come to a segment where we called rapid fire questions before we end the show. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions. The first thing that comes to your mind, right? So what are the top 3 things you look for when picking a leadership team?
Chemistry. It's got to align with the strategy. And I would say it's only those 2 things.
Wow.
You got to know what you're doing, and you got to have the right team working together. It's not about an individual person. It's got to be the chemistry of the team.
Excellent. What's the greatest obstacle that you overcame, and what did it teach you about leadership and resilience?
I struggle with the word obstacle. I'll tell you why. We're all on a journey. And, when people say, you got to fail to succeed, yes. I don't believe that. I think you're just on a journey. What you have to do is you need to be constantly learning a lesson from a situation. So there's no such thing as an obstacle. There's a situation presented itself. You might look at that and say, that was a great situation. I want to learn why that happened, or how I can replicate it, or how I can do better. Or you might look at it and say, that was an unmitigated disaster. I don't see it that way. I see it as, okay, that one, what did I learn? What can we do better? So I don't see the word obstacle in my thought process.
Good. What's the best advice that you've ever received?
Best advice I've ever received. I don't know. The best advice I ever, go to school.
Okay, I'll take that. What's the one advice you give young professionals looking to grow their career in the power utility sector?
I don't think it's power utility. I think just it's two things. Know yourself and learn. You're always going to be learning. And I don't mean learn, pick up a book or learn. Even just analyzing the lessons learned. Like that meeting went really well. Well, why did it go well?
Yes.
That meeting went not as I intended. Well, what derailed it? What could have happened differently?
Yes.
My son actually calls me sometimes, this happened in a meeting. What do you think? And you would think as a fly looking on that conversation, why are these two guys wasting all this time on nothing? It's not nothing. It really isn't nothing. It was a situation that played out. It could have played out 10 different ways, and there is meaning to each of the different ways. And the fact that you're willing to say, was it me or was it them? Was it politics or was it misconstrued? Mm-hmm. Was it good advice? Was it bad advice? It's just learning. Now, someone's going to say, that's overthinking. You've got a problem up here. I do. I overthink. But you know what? There's overthinking that keeps you up at night.
Yes.
And then there's overthinking because it's your way of thinking, right? If you can think your way through a problem and sleep 8 hours a day, that's not a problem.
That's right.
If you wake up at 4 a.m, and I used to be this person, and you're thinking about things, okay, that's overthinking.
Yep.
That's not good for you.
Absolutely. So throughout your journey, Carm, what are you most proud of?
My journey? What am I most proud of? I think it goes back to finding those slivers of myself in someone else's success.
Okay. And what's next for Carm?
Don't know. We'll see where the journey goes. I mean, I'm got a couple of renewable energy projects, lots of learning, not formal, lots of reading, lots of just taking it every day as it comes. Amazing.
Again, I want to thank you so much, Carm, for joining me today and the audience and sharing your stories, your experience, and your knowledge with everyone out there. Again, thank you to everyone out there for tuning in and joining us in this episode. And we'll see you in the next podcast. And if you have any questions for Carm, drop it in the box below and I'll make sure it gets to him. All right. Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Carm.